Hey, Pal, welcome. Thank you for joining me today.
Thanks for having me. I appreciate it.
Yes, and this is Payal Khurana, not to be mistaken with Corona, Khurana. And
Especially right now.
I know, right?
Yes, correct.
You want to share a little bit about who you are and what you do?
Totally. Well, who I am is a big answer, but what I do right now, I am a facilitator for mindfulness. I lead companies mainly, and individuals. It's something that I started doing about 7 years ago. I also have a startup that's a co-working space, but mainly focusing on mindfulness, helping people, companies connect to themselves and essentially remember that they're human. I think in work we tend to forget we're in our roles. So that's what I do.
Yeah. So for those that don't know, and I'm curious myself, how do you define mindfulness?
So I want to give you John Kabat-Zinn's definition, and then I'll give you mine. So John Kabat-Zinn is the father of the term mindfulness.
Okay.
And he defines it as paying attention on purpose, moment by moment, without judgment, to our thoughts, to our emotions, to our environment, and to our bodies.
Okay.
So it's paying attention on purpose, moment by moment, without judgment, that being one of the key components. And a little twist that I put to it is paying attention on purpose, moment by moment, without an attachment to the outcome.
So it's basically awareness all the time, meaning
Yes.
when you're in this perspective, when you're talking about mindfulness and meditation, it's coming off autopilot, being purposeful, and trying to drop or noticing when you are being judgmental or attached to outcomes.
Yes, it's coming into awareness. I mean, that's the biggest key is the more present we are, the more aware we can become. And so getting out of, are we in our past? Are we in the future? Are we worrying? Are we lamenting? Are we wanting something other than what's right here in this moment? And the more we can allow ourselves to come into the present, the more we can become aware of stories that we have or opinions that we have on how we would like things to be different than they already are.
So it's being here now instead of yes, everywhere that we normally are. It's worrying or thinking about the future or living in the story of something that happened, 30 minutes ago or 30 years ago, and kind of coming out of that and putting our focus on actually what's happening around us right now.
Yeah, and I think even, what you said right there, be here now. That statement in itself, to grasp it fully, to really be with just that statement, would be here now. I like to always ask people, so we've been chatting for about 5 minutes, and for you and me, like for the listener right now, for whoever's listening, I like to ask them, like, hey, have you checked out since you've been listening? It's been 5 minutes. Give or take 5 minutes. Have you gone into the future? Have you gone into the past? Have you been having a conversation in your head about, okay, this conversation is not what I thought it would be. Oh, it's boring me in some way. So what does that mean to be here now is noticing, okay, well, if I'm not here now, then where did I check out to? And did I check out? Because sometimes we don't even notice that we checked out.
Yeah.
Where it's so habitual.
Yeah, it's almost like being here now and being present is way more foreign than being in our head and hearing all of the junk going on in our head, right? And so sometimes to hear be here now, it sounds easy and simple, but before we can actually be in the present, we have to realize that we're thinking all of the time. And so it's kind of, is it kind of like bypassing the thoughts, or just not being attached to the thoughts, or how would you explain that?
So that was the two sharings I shared. It's like John Kabat-Zinn saying without judgment. And one of my mentors shares with me, that has shared with me in the past, like we're judgmental beings. We like to make judgment. We look at something and we say we like it, we don't like it. So it can be very challenging to hear something and say, oh, without judgment. Like, how am I going to do that without judgment if we haven't had practice? Mm-hmm. So that was why I like to look at it like, okay, without an attachment. So I might have a judgment of it, but maybe I can look at like, am I wanting this to be different? Am I needing this to be a certain way so I can feel a certain way? Yeah. So for me, it was easier to grasp and to look at being present. If I could look at like, well, what am I projecting onto this present?
Judgment kind of has a little bit of its own connotation already. And so a lot of times when you hear judgment, you think, oh, I'm judging somebody else, or I'm being critical of somebody else. But judgment in the sense that you're talking about is even just how we go through the day, analyzing and thinking about what's happening, that we don't realize all of the time just how in each moment we're judging, or how we're looking at what's happening. That's another way to say judgment, right? So that it gets people away from that connotation of judgment as, oh, you're just a judgmental person, whatever. Mm-hmm. It's turning that inside to us and looking at how that works for each of us. Is that accurate?
Yeah. It's like, how are we labeling it? Rather than, I think labeling is how we can look at judgment in that sense. It's like, are we labeling it good? Are we labeling it bad? Like, we've been taught to label most of our lives. That's just how we do. It's like, oh, don't do this, as we're growing up. Like, that's bad. Don't do that. This is good. We put things in boxes. That's why there's so much like judgment that we practice, and what we practice is what we continue to do. Yeah. So the more practice we have on judgment, the more we will continue. So how do we, in a way, suspend judgment?
Yes. How do we stop being so critical? How do we stop analyzing everything so that we can just be? And that's even situations like, just to give an example for people, that you're at work and you're doing something, and somebody comes up and starts talking to you, and that's the conversation that you're having with yourself. That's what you're thinking about the person. That's what you're thinking about yourself and how you're responding or how you handled a situation. So that it's kind of that, all of that mind chatter that happens all throughout the day, which for most of us is happening so much all throughout the day, right?
Yes. You reminded me of, so Eckhart Tolle is a leader in the, his is The Power of Now. And he shares a story at the beginning of his book that is of a man that's, talking to himself, and he's, out loud just saying all these random things. And there's another man that sees him and is looking at him, and in his mind, this other man is like, wow, that guy's nuts. Like, and having this whole conversation in his head, watching this other man, and they take a subway ride together. And afterwards, the whole purpose of the story was like, oh, wait a minute. Like he's just doing out loud what I'm doing in my head.
Yeah.
So we're all doing these conversations. Like, who are we talking to? And, you know, this guy that was in his head judging this other guy, saying like, oh my God, he's so crazy because he's just saying random things. Like he's just like, this is stupid, or, you know, what? Like this flower should be different. Like, why is this different? And just saying all these really things that don't make sense. But so was this guy in his brain. So it's like we're all doing the same thing. Just one person, this guy that was doing it out loud was just doing it out loud.
Yeah. And that constant chatter and judgment of ourselves and judgment of others and attachment to outcome and trying to control situations, like you said, so that we feel a certain way, all of that is what creates anxiety and stress and worry and basically steals our peace, correct?
Yeah. I mean, so it's, you know, it creates an experience for us. It's like, what are we focusing on? I think when you're saying like, what are we, you know, our brain chatter, it's like, well, what are we paying attention to? You know, a myth of mindfulness, a myth of meditation is I will practice and my mind will be still. And the truth is our mind never stops. That's its job. Just like our heart is meant to beat, our mind is meant to think. That's it's like a machine. And so if we allow ourselves to put our focus on our thoughts rather than our environment, you know, rather than our bodies, rather than purposefully being attentive to what's happening in our present moment, then we end up in our thoughts all the time. Then we end up allowing, you know, we end up like that guy that's yelling out things in the subway. Because we've chosen to put our attention on our thoughts rather than what's unfolding in front of us.
Yes. Okay. And so, yeah, where we put our focus and what we put our focus on expands. So if we're constantly listening to the chatter in our mind, then that's just going to get bigger and louder and make us feel more and more crazy to the point where it's like, just shut it off, you know, right?
Yeah. And well, I think that's a thing. It's like, well, okay, taking a step back too of like, okay, well, where do our thoughts come from? You know, and we can do a quick exercise that I like to do with people that I work with, that I think will be a fun exercise. How about you? Are you up for it?
Yeah, I'm game.
Okay. And then if anybody is listening, they can join along. This is a quick 2-3 minute exercise. So you can do it anytime. It's not, you know, something, anytime you're not driving. So anywhere you're not in a moving vehicle that you're the one behind, you can do it if you're the one in the passenger side. But it's a practice that you can do to just get yourself into the present moment. Okay. And it's a practice that'll help us with noticing how random our thoughts can be. So go ahead and close your eyes. Okay. And I'd like to ask everyone to put your feet flat on the ground. And then also check in with your back. You could be, you know, as long as you do whatever you want with your hands, but make sure your back is straight. It helps us remain more attentive. So let's begin with 3 deep breaths. So we're going to inhale and exhale. Inhale again and exhale. And one more time, inhale and exhale. Let's take a moment, and I'd like you to just scan your body for any sensations that might be happening in your body. Just just a quick scan of noticing any sensations, which could be heat, which could be cool, tingly. So you start from the top of your head and you just move all the way down to your toes. Maybe you notice tension. Just noticing what's happening in your body. Let's take another deep breath. We're going to inhale and exhale. And then I want you to notice any emotions that are happening for you. So again, not needing to judge them. Just notice what you're feeling in this moment right now. So it could be joy, could be anxiety, could be anger, could be happiness, anything that you're experiencing. Not needing it to be different than it is. Just noticing what's coming up for you. We're going to take one last deep breath. We're going to inhale and exhale. And I want you to notice your very next thought without any judgment. And then whenever you're ready, you can open your eyes. I'd love to hear what your next thought was.
I almost laughed at myself because my next thought was, I repeated what you said. That's my very next thought. And so, and then without judgment. And on that. Yeah, so that was it. And then, you know, the other thoughts coming in start coming up, like, do I look stupid? You know, that kind of stuff, you know.
But you noticed it. You noticed. Yes. First you repeated it, and then you noticed yourself say, do I look stupid?
Yeah. Yeah, and what's interesting is that it's an easy process, an easy exercise, but our mind chatter can be so loud that even when we want to check in with our body, this can be, you know, our mind can be going off. And so people sometimes, we don't even realize that we are separate from our thoughts. And so is the first step is to really start to notice and observe those thoughts, that when they happen, then we almost check in with the thought.
It can be a practice that you can begin with. I think that's what you said is very true. It's challenging sometimes for people to hear that they are not their thoughts. Because we can become so attached to our thoughts that we believe everything that we say. So, you know, when I did the exercise as well, I did it along with us. My next thought was fridge, because I don't know if you heard, but my son was in the background. So, you know, I'm like, and that was the first thing that was like, it wasn't him, it was just, but fridge, because I know he's at the fridge right now. And at the same time, very random. And so,
but that's where your focus went, was to him, hearing him. And so it makes sense that your thoughts are going to be around what he's doing.
Yes. And it wasn't like I'm a fridge.
Yes.
But sometimes if I have a thought that says, you know, sometimes another thing I like to ask people is, you know, do you remember your first thought this morning? You know, that can show us like how much we're in autopilot. Like we wake up and it's like, go, 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 right? Grab my coffee. Or, you know, now it's different right now because a lot of people aren't leaving their homes. So things are a little slower. So we might be more aware of what our first thought was. Or first thought is, you know, is it we grab our phone and look at a text message and say like, ugh, or we open our eyes and say, oh, I wish I got more sleep. Oh, like, you know, what's happening for me today? Or I wake up and I, you know, feel like, oh, another day. It's what was my first thought? And we can be so pulled into our thoughts that we aren't even aware of the fact that we had a first thought of the day.
Yes.
So I like to say it that way because then the more we practice, okay, just that practice, okay, I'm going to try to notice my first thought tomorrow morning. That helps to create that separation rather than, I think hearing we are not our thoughts, again, is a very big concept.
Yes.
And it's these little practices that can help us say, okay, well, tomorrow I'm just going to make it my goal to notice what I think.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And because hearing what are, I'm not my thoughts, then the next question becomes, then who am I?
Yes.
And that's a whole nother show that I would love for us to come back and talk about.
Yes.
But for the sake of this one,
yes.
Okay, so I read a statistic recently that said, and I'm going to get it wrong, but it's kind of close. I don't have it in front of me. That we have between I think it was 75 and 90,000 thoughts a day, the average person. And of those thoughts, like, I can't remember the percentage, but it's more than half, I believe, are negative and repetitive thoughts. And so that is that if we believe that we are our thoughts, then right off the bat, we see that 50% of the time at least, and again, I don't have the stat in front of me, but that our mind is creating an experience for us that we perceive as negative and repetitive. And
totally.
Okay, so going back to the exercise, was that a form of meditation, and is then meditation a tool and a practice that can help us separate and see that distinction between who we are in our mind, or just to kind of help us get out of our mind? Explain what meditation is and like what the purpose of it is.
So there's multiple purposes of meditation. Like what we just did was a practice in awareness. Was a practice in paying attention. So we paid attention to our breath. We took a couple deep breaths to calm our nervous system, because that's something that you just mentioned is our brain is giving us negative thoughts, 50% of the time, because our nervous system is intending to protect us. So when we took those deep breaths, our intention there was, okay, let's calm our nervous system, because our nervous system is generally always looking like, okay, how can I protect this human? How can I protect this human?
Because that is the fight or flight that is basically from when way back hundreds and thousands of years ago, right?
Totally. When we were cavemen. And right now, what do we have to protect ourselves from? Which, interestingly, our fight or flight is magnified right now, because a lot of us are aiming to protect ourselves from this virus. And so why it's so important that we do as simple as taking 3 deep breaths to calm our nervous system. So that was our first step. So that was a practice in calming our nervous system. And then it was paying attention to what's happening in our body. So that was a practice in awareness. And then again, what's happening in our emotional body? Like, what are we noticing coming up? Again, practice in awareness. And then what's our next thought? Was also like paying attention. And so one way of meditating is it's a tool to train our attention. Because if you think about it, we're both adults and we're over 30. So when we were, I was never, when I was young, taught to pay attention. I always find it interesting that like a teacher, when we're in school, is like, pay attention. But who ever taught us to pay attention? Yeah. So meditation teaches us how to pay attention, because here's mindfulness that's saying pay attention on purpose. But if we want to pay attention on purpose, great. But if I don't know how to pay attention on purpose, then how can I be mindful? So meditation is that tool that can help us become more attentive and more focused on our bodies, our environment.
Okay. And so what would you say is a good place to start for people who are wanting to become, help quiet the thoughts, get a little bit more peace, maybe start to see that they're not their thoughts, tiptoe into the meditation? Like, where's a good place to start? Something like what you just did?
I think it's a perfect place to start. As simple as even just 3 deep breaths, like saying, okay, looking at what I do every single day, like, so it's something called habit stacking is what I like to suggest is, what do I do no matter what? So most of us all brush our teeth every day. So maybe I'm going to choose that after I brush my teeth, I'm going to take 1 deep breath or take 2 deep breaths. And with those deep breaths, I'm going to do my best to pay attention to when I inhale and when I exhale. And that's it. That's my only practice.
Just anything that, not anything, but that paying attention is enough to take our focus off of those thoughts for even if it's just for a couple seconds.
And it could even be as simple as when I'm brushing my teeth to notice where my thoughts go. So when I'm brushing my teeth, make sure, before I start to brush my teeth, like, okay, I'm going to brush my teeth and notice if I can feel the bristles on my teeth.
Yeah.
Or have I checked out? Like most of us, like how many of us get into a shower and do we actually feel the water, feel the soap on our bodies? Like most of us are somewhere.
That's the best time to think is in the shower.
Yes. It's a great time. A lot of good ideas happen.
But I get what you're saying. We're not going through what we're actually doing. We're going through the motions, and yet our mind and our thoughts are someplace else.
Yeah.
And so it's trying to bridge that gap.
Yeah. And so I think starting as simple as a couple deep breaths, but being consistent. So that's the biggest thing. It's like, okay, well, if I said, okay, well, I'm going to meditate for 10 minutes a day, you'd be surprised that 10 minutes of sitting in silence and paying attention to my breath, because that's meditation, is having one focal point where it's, again, I mentioned attention training. So what's the thing that I'm going to be focused on? Is it my breath? Is it my body? Is it somebody else's voice, someone's that's guiding?
Okay.
And then noticing when I've gotten distracted and coming back. So, if I chose that, okay, I'm going to start with 21 days of 10 minutes of meditation. It can be challenging if I've never practiced before to sit in that space for 10 minutes. So I like to suggest something as simple as choosing either 1 minute, setting a timer and saying, okay, I'm going to set my timer for 1 minute after I brush my teeth, and maybe not even notice my breath. Just look at my thoughts, like what comes up for me. It could be as simple as that. But it's making it small enough so that you can be consistent with it, so that you can say, okay, I've done 30 days of it. And it's something that you won't, or a person can't make an excuse of, I don't have enough time.
Yeah. Yeah. Because you start with 1 minute.
Yeah.
And it's like anything else that we do, the more consistently you're doing it and the more you're putting on it, the more you'll experience the quieting of the mind, or noticing less, or what is the progression? If somebody starts with a minute, then what is the next step?
So, that's the thing, is like you said, quieting of the mind. There's no quieting of the mind. It's, where's the, after 30 days, you might notice, it might not be that you notice, on day 31, like, oh, that was easier today. It could be that you're driving down the road and, someone cuts you off, and instead of blaring on your horn, you have a moment, you're like, maybe they're having a bad day. And instead of blaring on your horn, like, you're like, oh, You know, it's noticing, you have more awareness of, oh, well, this person just cut me off, and it brought up something inside of me. And instead of reacting in a way that might, not that saying a horn is a bad thing again, but let's say actually instead of blaring on a horn, maybe it was, you want to throw something at them, right?
Yeah.
Like someone cuts me off and I want to go and I want to go cut them off back.
Yeah.
So maybe that's how I feel before I start the 30 days. But then 15 days in, I'm able to notice that I have more of a sense of awareness of what my normal reaction would be, what my habitual habit reaction would be. So we generally move from action to reaction.
Yes.
And so the more we practice the simple practice of noticing, the more we're able to become aware. So the benefits, it's hard to tell because everyone is so different.
Yeah. Look
You
different
might have,
for everyone.
it will look so different, and it could happen at a different time. It could happen 10 days in, it could happen 20 days in, it could happen 30 days in, it could happen 2 days in. It's very individualistic.
Yeah.
But what I do know, due to practicing on and off, I've been practicing on and off for, I think, almost 17 years, that it's like an onion, and we just peel layer after layer of more awareness and learning more and more about myself in the process, and being able to show up the way I want to show up, rather than the stories or the things that habits I've picked up from other people or habits I've picked up from my family. I'm able to now choose, okay, how do I want to show up in the world because of my awareness?
Yeah. It creates a space, or it can, for some people, create a space for response instead of reaction.
Yes, that's the key distinction.
Yes. And, I've done meditation off and on for 12 years. And when I'm doing it and doing it consistently is the key, is when I can feel and experience the most benefit from it. And then there's times like earlier this week, my mind has been racing, and I was trying, which is the opposite of what we should do with meditation, just being with it. But I mean, it was like, I can't even sit here with myself, So there will be days that happens, right? That it's just like, and that's
there's resistance.
And so that's an opportunity for us to not be that judgmental self of like, what am I doing wrong? Or, oh my gosh, I can't, just to like, that's what's happening for me today.
Yeah. That this is a day that my mind is racing. This is a day that I'm going to sit for meditation, and I don't, there's some meditations that can be a meditation where you're able to notice the space in between thoughts.
Yes.
Like you'll get to the, oh, this is why a lot of people meditate. But then there's the days that are like there's just so many thoughts, and there's a lot of emotions attached to those thoughts.
Yes.
So those are challenging days, and it's such a journey. You've been practicing for 12 years, and every day is different, I imagine.
Yeah. Well, and I haven't done it consistently for 12 years. So,
that's okay. Yeah. I haven't been consistent either, but that's why it's called a practice rather than, there's monks that practice every single day, but we call it a practice because it's a journey. Yeah. And that's the other part, is there's nowhere to get. Yeah. There's no, okay, we're not getting a grade for this. We're not, going to get a prize at the end. It's just a practice for us to practice.
Yes. Okay. All right. That makes sense. Wow, I want to keep talking, but we're going to have to do this again because I want to talk about who we are if we're not our thoughts, and then I
Yes.
want us to talk about also the space between our thoughts. And
Let's do it.
and when you said that, that I think is the biggest benefit for meditation for me. I'm not going to say the biggest, but it's one of the, I think, the ones that's most important. Quieting the mind, I get what you're saying, that doesn't happen, but meditation helps me slow it down, and so it feels like it's quieter. It probably isn't, but
Right.
it can help slow those racing thoughts down, and then on some days it doesn't. So
Right.
Okay, I'm going to ask one more question, and then we'll wrap up, and we're going to do this again. You can have Zion come on with us. I know you're juggling so much right now. So I'm just like offering you up to do this again. But
no, I'm up for it.
Okay, awesome. So, when you hear meditation, people, a lot of times, I know for me, when I first heard it, you picture somebody sitting on the floor, cross-legged with their hands a certain way, but that doesn't really matter. It sounds like what you just said. I mean, even just sitting up straight and putting your feet on the floor and just sitting somewhere comfortable. Speak to that.
Yeah, I share this with, anytime I facilitate meditation is, well, in particular, mindfulness is paying attention on purpose. So as long as we're paying attention on purpose, so I could be running, so a meditation of running could be that I'm going to go for a run and be focused on my breath the entire time. So, but if I have headphones in my ear and I'm listening to my music, then am I really present to my breath, or am I present to the environment? So it can be done not sitting cross-legged in front of a candle. It can be done with writing. If I sit down with a piece of paper and I pen and I do a stream of consciousness of thoughts, like I'm just going to write and write and write, and notice when I shift my attention from that piece of paper and pen, because it will happen. Yeah. So that's a meditation. It's a practice. So it does not have to be, it could even be the gym. If I go into the gym and I say, okay, for the next 30 minutes, it's, a longer session, but I'm going to notice how often I check out. How often am I not present to being at the gym? When am I in my thoughts? And a lot of us are working from home. So another way of a meditation could be that, how often do I check out when I'm on a Zoom call? Mm-hmm. If someone else is talking and I start thinking about something else or somebody else or some other time, then that's a meditation to notice, okay, well, was I present the whole time?
Yeah. Okay. I love this. I love talking about this. Okay, we're going to do this again. If anybody has questions, then ask them, and we'll figure out a way to get them answered. And maybe you can come on and do a meditation for us sometime.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, let's do it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you for having me. It was fun. It was a lot of fun. I feel like we could have talked for hours. I'm like, oh, it's already, we went over our time limit. That's okay.
Yeah, that's right.
Thank you.
Okay. All right. Thank you so much.
Thank you.